okay, well, I have to do something to make money. I have to pay rent. I have to eat, all of that. You know, I have to survive. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do here? I don't want to be writing bad checks again. What can I do? And so I started to steal money from people, specifically white trust fund kids who I would meet out at bars and at shows.
Kari, we were actually supposed to have this conversation a couple months ago. It didn't happen because you were not feeling well at the time. So I'm very happy you're here now. Also, funny story just before we start that when you were outside with my producer, you mentioned she told you that you could leave your stuff behind there, that there was nothing to worry about. And what did you say?
I said, well, I'm the one you have to worry about.
Which I thought was really
you have to have
funny.
a sense of humor about it.
For sure.
Fortunately, now I can be like, well, I have a book that talks about why I can have that sense of humor.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to introduce you to everybody. Our Kari Ferrell, welcome to the podcast, our guest today. You became known as a hipster grifter. Your cons went viral. You even, you slide and stole money from people. We'll get into that. You also convinced people that you were cancer survivors for some time, and all while stealing identities and running scams across at least 2 states. But also, most importantly, you recently wrote an amazing book that I just started reading, and
thank you.
I'm really into.
Thank you for saying that it's amazing.
You're super funny, and you're a great writer. And the book is called "You'll Never Believe Me: A Life of Lies, Second Tries, and Things I Should Only Tell My Therapist."
Yes.
Yeah? This came out last year?
It came out last year, yep.
Okay.
Last January. In media, we glorify authors as they should be, but it's always like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to sit down and write. And I'm like, I wrote my book by slamming my head into the keyboard.
That's right.
It was a lot of, almost one-sided therapy, but I'm just beyond grateful that people are spending time with my words. And in some cases, if they're listening to the audiobook, letting my vocal fry into their brains.
Okay, let's take it all the way back.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Salt Lake City, right?
Yep, a suburb of Salt Lake City. I was adopted when I was 5 months old, and my parents at the time lived in Phoenix. And at one point, the Mormon missionaries came knocking on the door, asking if my parents had time to talk about their Lord and Savior, and they opened the door and they were like, we have more than time. We have an eternity.
Wow.
And so my parents converted, and we moved to Salt Lake City when I was 2 years old.
Huh. And wait, can you tell me a little bit about your adoption story? You're originally from South Korea, is that correct?
Yep, from somewhere around Seoul. I unfortunately don't have much information and likely will not. We can get into it later, but there's some irony in, Korean adoption and how truthful and legitimate it may or may not be.
That's right.
Yeah.
We've looked into doing a story about this for when I was working on Trafficked about sort of there was big market of sort of illegal adoptions, or at least fraudulent adoptions, right?
Exactly. And children and birth mothers were really used as commodities. And a lot of it was relationship building between South Korea and the US. Obviously, there's a lot of history between the two. And the country of South Korea actually last year came out and admitted that a lot of these adoptions were fraudulent, or if not completely fraudulent, under the pretense of telling these single mothers that their children would be sent to the US for an education and that they would be coming back, things like that. So
do you think that's what happened to you?
I have no idea. I think that, for the bit, it's like the irony of a scammer being born out of a scam is not lost on me. But yeah, there's really, I think, no way of me knowing.
And do you know what led your adoptive parents to go and want to adopt?
Yeah, so my mother just was unable to have biological children, and they made the amazing choice, and with the idea that, you don't have to give birth to be a parent. And so I grew up with a really amazing, I mean, I had an amazing childhood. My family was super loving. I was not abused in any way, shape, or form. That was actually something that it had been reported that I was telling people, which is not the case. I've always been very, 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 it's been always been very important to me to let people know that I had a great childhood. But all of that is to say, this was throughout the 90s, and we just didn't have the resources that we have now. And so, my parents didn't have Reddit or forums to talk to other adoptive parents. And so I was really raised just kind of as a white person. Like that's how I identified. That's even though I, saw myself in the mirror, the thought processes, the way that I viewed the world in a lot of ways was that of all the people around me.
And when did you realize first that you were different?
I mean, pretty immediately because I look different. And so my book actually opens with a scene as a child in elementary school where I was being asked, why my face was so flat, like why my real parents didn't want me. So I was always hyper aware. And my parents, had provided me with the response to those kinds of comments. But, with it being so based in religion, a lot of those retorts were like, oh, well, God, I was so special to God that, I was sent here basically to be saved. And yeah, there are some issues there. But again, my parents did the best that they could. So a lot of my experience is dualities and realizing that you are very much able to feel multiple ways about the same thing. Yeah.
Can you tell the story about, there's a great part in your book where you talk about when kids were presenting in the classroom and you had to present a character, right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it was show and tell. And I think one of my defense mechanisms in my entire life has been to sort of like make fun of myself before others can, right? It felt like taking the power away. And so for one show and tell, I'm a US citizen and I was adopted and then, it took a couple of months, but received my citizenship. However, when I was first in the US, I was a card had been given to my parents that said legal resident alien. And so as a kid, you don't think of aliens as it was always
Human
like
beings.
the extraterrestrial,
Yeah, of
right?
course,
It was
yeah.
not like people.
Right.
And so I, at show and tell, made up this story about like being an actual alien and then showing the card as proof.
Oh, that is so cute.
So I think that, I've always been a natural
Uh-huh.
storyteller, whether or not the stories that I'm telling are truthful, that's a difference. That's a different
And
story.
also like a big imagination, right?
A big imagination. And I think that, I don't want to my story and my book, I'm not trying to blame anything specifically for the reason that I ended up making a lot of poor decisions and just kind of putting other people's feelings and my own feelings aside. But I do think that there's a lot to be said about growing up looking the way that I do in a very oppressive, very predominantly white religion.
How do you think so? How do you think that led to some of your behavior later on?
Well,
And I don't think, by the way, you're right. I don't think it's blaming anyone. I think that having an understanding of where that came from and how it developed is very important. And having that self-awareness is great.
I think, for example, the doctrine is no longer within their scripture because that's the thing about the LDS church is they'll just retract things. It's like Jesus fanfic. They're like, oh, that doesn't fit the that doesn't fit the narrative anymore. Let's get rid of that. But one of the scriptures, used to say something like, if you had darker skin, you were dark and loathsome because they believed that, everyone was white until people were cursed with darker skin. And so...
And this was something that you knew growing up, that was in the scripture, that
Yeah.
in the religion that your parents believed in?
Yes.
And that was talked about around the house?
And, maybe not so much in the house, but like in church and within like social gatherings within the church. And I was a very tan child, first of all, but knew that they were talking about me and other people like me. And so the church also has 3 tiers of heaven, and you cannot get to grade A heaven as a woman unless you're married. But at the same time, I'm being told, oh, no one's ever going to want to marry you because you are cursed, essentially. So, I think it was things like that I definitely couldn't have verbalized my feelings around at the time, but caused me to really just become, an addict for attention and acceptance and approval. For a number of reasons and a number of different kinds of approval. I think I got to a point where I didn't necessarily care if I was being remembered for good things, bad things. I just wanted to be remembered.
Here's a little fact about me. I'm an optimist. Ask anyone who knows me and they'll tell you that I'm an inveterate optimist. But the past few years have been a bumpy ride, even for us optimists. AI is coming for our jobs, people are angry, and the world feels upside down. It's no wonder so many of us are anxious, trying to figure out how to protect ourselves and our loved ones. One thing that keeps me a little less stressed: life insurance. Knowing I have it, that my husband has it, that in a real meaningful way we're protected. Trust me, having life insurance can be a game changer. Unlike other one-size-fits-all companies, SelectQuote's licensed agents work for you. In as little as 15 minutes, they'll compare policies from top-rated carriers to find the best fit for your health and your budget. And they work for you for free. Get the right life insurance for you for less and save more than 50% at selectquote.com/Mariana. Save more than 50% on term life insurance at selectquote.com/Mariana today to get started. That's selectquote.com/Mariana. So when did that start? When did your
Yeah.
I was going to say lies, but that's what it was. But
Yeah.
when did it all start? Yeah.
I mean, I think I was kind of this like model student, Mormon girl, for a long time.
Did you have friends at school?
Yeah, I had friends at school. I would say that I was very much like a social butterfly, was able to sort of flit in between these different groups, but it's because I was very good at playing different parts, which, is an asset when it comes to certain things, but not necessarily when you're trying to make like authentic friendships.
Right.
So I would say like high school is really where it started to, even if I weren't lying, it was just kind of like, this is the hat that I put on when I'm with these people. This is the other hat that I put on with these people. And, everyone does that, but I think maybe I took it more seriously and to more of an extreme. I do remember, I was probably around 16 that I started to, I think, the freedom that comes with when you're 16. It's like ironically, as my personal freedoms were sort of expanding, I myself was closing, myself within these tales that I was telling. And it started, I think, I don't want to say this is benign, but like a lot of people's lives where it's like your parents are like, how was school? Or,
Your parents
like,
are what?
Your parents ask you, how was school?
Oh, right.
And you, whatever. Or ditching classes. But then it escalated to, or I should say, it grew to me then shoplifting. And I was doing that with friends of mine. And then it escalated from that over the years to me writing these bad checks to people who cared about me, friends. It wasn't, in the beginning, it wasn't random people. It was people who wanted to help. And so I was writing these checks, and it's funny because sometimes I'll go on these like Gen Z podcasts where I have to explain what a check is. I'm like, literally, it's a piece of paper where you could ascribe any amount to it,
you wanted to,
any number,
right.
and
any
hand it over to
signature,
someone, and people would,
Right.
But
wait, let's go back just
sorry.
1 second to the shoplifting. Did you ever get caught shoplifting?
I did get caught shoplifting, and I talked my way out of it. And
did your parents ever find out?
They did not. They did not find out. And I think that's when I realized that the gift of gab is a blessing and a curse.
What did you say? And what were you shoplifting?
Yeah, I was it was so stupid. I mean, aren't all of the things
Yeah. I'll tell you my story too.
I would love to hear your
I was
story.
caught shoplifting too.
I think
and I was
it
16 as well.
Hair gel or hairspray, something hair related. So dumb. So dumb. I had like a magazine with me that I had brought into the store, and I like folded the magazine over it. It's like so dumb.
Like a fat magazine.
Yeah, I'm like, why also would who walks into a store just with like a magazine? Yeah, and I was caught as I was walking out, and I basically told a story about how, I was having a bad day and I was just frazzled and I wasn't thinking properly, and I'm so sorry, I'll pay for it. I didn't mean to just, walk out, and they let me pay for it.
Wow.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I had the like $3 or whatever it was.
And they didn't call your parents or anything?
Call my parents.
Wow.
No,
so they called my parents.
Yeah, so
I called my mom. It was at a big grocery store, like a big one in my town where I grew up in Portugal. And for me, it was so stupid. It was chocolate. It was like a fancy chocolate that I really wanted. And at the time, it was like something that was happening with my friends. Like we would go out and shoplift like little things. I also did with my best friend around the same time. We went to Zara and they had the alarm tags on, and we cut them off. And so we were going around with these like this one jacket. I remember this like black sort of blazer kind of jacket that was so cool. It was like the coolest thing I'd owned. I loved it. I wore it all the time. But then it had a huge hole on the collar from where I'd cut it. So I stole that. I stole like a couple of bikinis. So embarrassing. And then because these were becoming easy, I went to this big store with cameras everywhere and decided I wanted some fancy chocolate and stole it. And then obviously the security guard came and called my mom. And that was the last time I ever stole. I was utterly embarrassed. And my mom, gave me a good talk. That was the last time. But
well, I'm glad you learned your lesson because I unfortunately did not.
Yeah. I think calling the mother was like the key for me because with the conversation she had with me after, I was like, this is so stupid. Yeah. Okay. So go ahead. This is not me talking. It's you.
No, I love to. I mean, I think that's the thing is that a lot of my story is very relatable to a lot of people for different reasons.
Yeah.
But, there are a lot of kids who kind of step over that line and then realize that they need to step back. Right. And then there are other people who are like, oh, well, that was exciting. That was different. That worked. And so then the other foot follows.
And what about the check? When was the first time you wrote a false check?
So I was 17, I want to say 17 or 18. And it was written to a boyfriend of mine. And
so somebody you were dating at the time, and he had checks himself? He had a checkbook?
Checks. So basically what it was is that I had checks. I had a bank account. Obviously, it did not have as much money as I was saying that it did. So my scam, the get was, I would say, for whatever reason, my ATM card is not working, but I can still write checks. So, can I write a check for $150 to you, for helping me out? I'll give you $50, whatever it was. And I knew that one of the ways, again, it's really hard for people to understand, and I get it, because for me, a lot of it was like, okay, I know that when you ask someone to do a favor for you, they're more likely than to ask you to do a favor for them. And that is how relationships and friendships can be built. Obviously, that's true, but I just didn't have the right context. There were times where I would be writing these checks because I wrote a few of them to this guy. And then there were a few times where I wrote them to other friends as well. And sometimes, every time that I wrote one, I was like, okay, by the time this bounces, which could be anywhere from 3 days to a week and a half, depending upon the bank, I was like, I'm going to have the money to pay these people back. Sometimes I did. More often than not, I did not.
And so they would come back to you and say, hey, by the way, that check bounced.
Yeah.
Where's my money?
Yeah, and because they were people who cared about me and friends, it was never, at least in the beginning, it wasn't accusatory. It was just like, hey, something's going on. You need to figure this out. And
because they didn't, not for a second did they think that you were trying to scam them.
Exactly. And then, from there it kind of became, what is the phrase, stealing from Peter to pay Paul. So it became this thing and eventually just snowballed out of control. And I want to be very clear that I'm the one who was rolling that snowball. This was not, I take full accountability in what I did.
Did you lose friends at the time because of this?
Yeah. I mean, a big reason that I left Utah to go to New York is because I basically ran myself out of that town. It's a very small city even still, but especially back in, the 2000s. And then even smaller if you're in a part, different subcultures. So I was very into, in the indie music scene, the art scene. And so, at a certain point, very quickly, it got out and circulated that I was doing this to friends, to people, who knew me.
Did you have a job at the time, or you were in school, I guess, obviously?
I had a job. I actually had for being the age that I was, a pretty good job. I was a veterinary technician.
And you were also in high school? You were around 17?
Yeah, so there was a program in my high school. This was after high school, but there was a program in my high school where you were able to, your junior and senior years, essentially leave with an associate's degree in veterinary sciences, which is an amazing thing that they were offering. And so I had internships and then ended up getting hired at one of those vet clinics. And so...
Did you want to be a vet at the time?
I did. Yeah. That's what I thought. And then once I started doing it, I was like, oh, the business side of things is more where my interests are, or I guess my talents. I loved working with animals, but it also... the emotional toll of that is not easy. And then seeing how it is a business is very difficult sometimes. But I do remember there was an incident where the police came to my work. Like, I'm in scrubs, I'm at the vet clinic, and they asked me if I could speak with them in the parking lot. They basically were like, you have warrants for your arrest. We could arrest you right now. And I was like, I'm at work, literally about to, and I don't remember if this was true, but like about to go into surgery, because I was an assistant.
Right.
I was a veterinary assistant. I misspoke earlier, not a technician, a vet assistant. And I said that, and they let me go back in, but they were like, you have to take care of these warrants.
So at this point, you had all these warrants for you, for bad checks.
For bad checks, yeah. And what is, I guess, it's interesting, and it's a testament, I think, to the people, my victims, because again, they cared about me. Even after they found out, they were upset. Some of them rightfully didn't want to talk to me anymore, but there were others who were like, how do we help you? Like, you're clearly going through something.
Right.
And I'm so fortunate because there are people who I still speak with now, who really never, stopped caring, which is just, it's
real friendship. If you went through all of that and you did what you did to them and still being there for you, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's interesting to me, sort of, what is it about you? Because even when I get a bill that has been unpaid, and it like stays with me. I like get very anxious about the idea that that I owe some money to somebody. Sure. Like what is it about? You're hoping you might be able to pay those people back, but surely you knew that there was a high chance, and you actually stopped being able to pay these people back. So at this point, did you feel any stress? Was it stressful for you, or What was going through your mind, or how were you rationalizing this?
That's a great question, and I will do my best to try to answer it because that's something that still continues to confuse me. Uh, a lot of the money that I was getting from writing these bad checks was going toward taking my friends out for
Hmm.
dinner, paying for things left and right. And again, people would ask me, okay, so you had a job. Did you have an addiction?
Hmm.
What drugs were you on?
Right.
Were you gambling? What is going on? Why did you need all of this money? And it really was because in my mind, I had it twisted and I was just like, okay, I'm going to be the person that everyone wants to hang out with
Hmm.
because I'm treating people to these
Hmm.
things. And I realize now I just wanted to assimilate.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be me.
Yeah. You didn't
Um,
think you was enough.
yeah, I think that's really it. And I mean that's part of it. I struggle with, I just the the media obviously has
Hmm.
twisted things. And I struggle with how and what I can accept.
Hmm.
I don't like thinking that I guess I was like made this way. I think one of the things that I truly believe is that people people love to think, oh, everyone's born good and then they turn bad.
Hmm.
And for me, I really try not to see good people, bad people. I think of it as people who make good decisions or bad decisions.
Hmm.
And there are certain people, whether that's circumstantial or, brain chemistry,
Hmm.
who need to be taught how to make good decisions.
Hmm.
And that can be very difficult.
Hmm.
And I think that we as a society do ourselves a disservice by, yeah, believing that everyone has equal opportunities to make good decisions.
Hmm.
That's jumping a little bit ahead because that's something that I discovered, while I was incarcerated, just in speaking to all of these incredible women that I met, who, again, some of them, sure, were not taking accountability. Some of them were not, committed to making better choices.
Hmm.
But by and large, the majority of women there either shouldn't have, I mean, I believe that no one should be
Hmm.
incarcerated at all, but definitely, they were defending themselves. They were getting themselves out of a bad situation. It was literally survival. And, we're setting them up to fail.
I mean, that's my whole work. I mean, so much of it is sort of exploring the gray area and trying to understand why people do what they do, trying to place ourselves in their shoes, and seeing that for a lot of them, particularly in my work in black markets, it is a lack of opportunities, and it's the environment they grew up in and the conditions that they were given that leads them into these worlds, or into life of crime. And I mean, it doesn't excuse them, but I think understanding and seeing the humanity in everybody is crucial to sort of seeing the whole
Absolutely.
picture, right?
Yeah, and that's, I mean, one of the many reasons that I appreciate your work because it's so easy to think of people, especially, former criminals. Uh,
Yeah, people who did time in prison. Yeah.
and statistically, everyone knows someone who has or is incarcerated. We in the US have anywhere from 1.8 to 2 million
It's insane.
people incarcerated at any given time. For women, and of course, all of these stats, it's like, well, then you look at, how many of those people are people of color?
Hmm.
How many of those people, were never given the
Hmm.
opportunity or the tools, resources that
Hmm.
they need to succeed.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, that's really what I've dedicated my work toward now is just ensuring that people do have the opportunities that I did.
Hmm.
Because I am not like a lot of formerly incarcerated
Hmm.
people. Big part of that, though, is that I had, support network. I had, as we were just talking about, friends who stuck by me despite it all. I had, you know, access to a therapist.
Hmm.
So just really trying to make sure everyone has those same opportunities. It would be great if we could nip that in the bud and, have that be a thing that is just part of society, like this, when
Right.
you're born, when you're here. But at the very least, making sure people who are let out, who are released, can do everything they can to not go back in to that system.
It is interesting, though, you say, do you think that if you didn't feel like you were different growing up and you didn't have other people making you feel like you were different, do you think that you would have still started conning people, or having this wish to be somebody else and have the stuff that you didn't actually have?
I don't think so. It's hard to say because, it's the what ifs. They can, it's like throwing yourself to the wolves sometimes, but I was always playing a part. I was always playing the, again, like just how I identified. People think it's hyperbolic. I think when I'm like, I was the only Asian person in my school, but then I'll pull out a yearbook or a class picture and they'll be like, oh, you weren't kidding.
You were actually the only Asian person. Wow.
There was another Asian girl who moved to my school who was also adopted later on. But yeah, there were good periods of time where I was the only Asian person in my class.
And kids were mean, like in every school, not just your school. I mean, generally, kids are just, I remember a lot of incidents of people just being mean.
Totally. I think that kids are mean, but they have no filters and they're curious. I think a lot of questions I was asked were not necessarily malicious, though there were times where they certainly were. But often, I think it was just kids being like, this is weird, you're weird, what's up? Like, you don't look like us.
Right. Yeah, they're not intentionally being mean. It just what comes out of their mouth sometimes hurts without them even knowing.
Yeah, society was just so different. I mean, I write about this, but there was a like a playground rhyme / game, whatever, where it was like, and a lot of people after they read my book wrote to me about this and they were like, oh my God, that brought back such memories. And I was a kid who was like saying these things, or I was a kid on the receiving end. But it was like, you would take your eyes and Chinese, Japanese, da 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 da. And I remember being so annoyed because I was like, I'm Korean.
Why isn't that listed there?
If you're gonna say things, talk shit on me, like at least get it right. But yeah, it was just we didn't have the visibility. I think the only Asian woman that almost anyone could name at that time was Lucy Liu, who's incredible. But it's like, I think that I was a pretty, by all accounts, like cute kid, but no one really knew that that was the case because no one ever really saw people like me. And so they just, I was just so different. And so to answer your question, I was always playing a part, whether I wanted to be or not. I was just doing everything I could always to fit in. But I also, throughout all of it, was very much who I am, which is, a person who I love making people laugh. I love being creative. And in the Mormon religion, as a woman, you're really told that your purpose is to procreate, and that's, be a homemaker. And I rejected that very early on, which, that was another thing that wasn't super easy to navigate. I think that if I would have been encouraged to tap into my creativity in different ways, I think that's really what would have prevented me from running amok. Because again, it was part of this natural storytelling ability. One of the most amazing things that has come from having this book out is that I have heard from people who knew me back then, victims of mine. And there was this woman who wrote me and she was like, this is what you should have been doing with your abilities, from day one. I'm so happy that you got there eventually. And that was so meaningful to me for so many reasons. It would have been even if I hadn't known this person, but the fact that they were someone that I told stories to, and that ended our friendship. But to then find me after this came out,
Yeah.
to say that was just really powerful.
Yeah, and very kind of that person
So
to reach out to
kind.
you to say that.
So beyond kind,
Right.
and it was so unexpected. And but I think, so much of my work is to show that second chances are deserved and that we all evolve and that change is possible. It's interesting because, white liberals, people love to say, oh, we believe, we root for the underdog. We want everyone to succeed, do the crime, pay the time, but then you're good. And it's like, no, 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 no. Like you might say that, but structurally, systemic,
Yeah, that's not how the
it's
system is set up.
not how the system's set
And I
up.
want to get there about what what your life was like when you left prison, because that was super hard as well, right?
Yeah.
We'll get there. So when just going back to the checks before you left Salt Lake City, when people would come up to you and say, "Hey, dude, what's up?" And they would ask you for money. Did you come up with excuses, or did you at some point say, "Yeah, I lied to you"? Did you?
It was always about buying more time. There were a couple of times where I fessed up, but it was really when my back was against the wall. It was like I was a caged animal. It was really only under that pressure of being caught. And even then, I would try to talk my way out of things until I realized that there was literally no way that I could.
And that reminds me, there's a story where you were dating your boyfriend. You passed a bunch of bad checks to him, and then at one point he goes with you to the bank, right? Can you tell that story?
Yeah. So, I mean, I went to the bank and I was able to convince the person who was helping us try to figure things out because, again, obviously I knew what the problem was. The problem was that I didn't have any money in my account.
Right.
But walked into the bank
with him
to say, hey, I've been, on the phone for hours with customer service. They're realizing that there's an issue. I spun this crazy yarn. And ultimately, I convinced the bank representative that we were sitting down at their desk with, that there was something wrong on their end.
Oh, wow.
And that bought me time. And they didn't say like, oh, we see that you're not at fault or whatever, but they said, yeah, I'll investigate this further. Clearly there's something that's going on, miscommunications, our system might be down, whatever it is. And I remember just being like, whoa, I can't believe that I pulled this off. And another thing that some people might find difficult to believe is that I was not plotting or planning these things. It was all so reactionary. It was like, I wasn't like, okay, I'm going to go to the bank and I'm going to say these things and this is how it's all going to go down, da 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 da. It was like, my boyfriend was probably like, what the fuck is going on? And I was like, you know what? Great idea. Let's go to the bank. Let's go. Like, who would write bad checks and then
think that it's a good idea to go to the bank?
The property of the bank.
Right.
So people are like, oh, mastermind. I'm like, no, I was dumb as shit. Like,
right. It's interesting you say that. That's probably one of the only, I mean, I sat in the studio for an interview with Anna Delvey, and she said very little as opposed to you. But one of the things that sort of came across in that interview was that idea that in her, it wasn't like a big plan. It like things just escalated, and then it was hard to sort of extricate themselves from that position, that situation. Yeah. It wasn't like there was a big master plan to get money from this person and create this life. It was just, you start small, it escalates, and then you find yourself in the middle of all of this gigantic avalanche, essentially.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, that might be one of the only ways that Anna and I are similar.
Yeah. Wait, I was going to say that.
I mean, get your bag, girl, I truly it's two sides of the same coin.
Right.
But
so going back to that moment. So it's another example for you of how even when you're doing bad things, you can get away with it and nobody is going to find out and you just can keep doing it, kind of idea. In a way.
Was the feeling until it wasn't, right? Because ultimately everyone started to find out. It started to circulate. people were confronting me while I was
Mm-hmm.
out and about. I mean, and again, I don't think that it was necessarily the right decision or okay of them to do that, but I totally get it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are people, but yeah, again, like I am very clear about how these were people who were friends.
Mm-hmm.
This was not, you know, random people. Not that that would be any better or
Right,
worse,
right.
but
But
like,
it's, yeah, particularly bad if you're doing it to people who supposedly, love you and
yeah,
have your best interest in mind. So they were coming up to you and they were saying all this stuff. And then I'm sure they all started talking about you and
totally.
people stopped hanging out with you or wanting to be friends with you. How did that feel for you at the time? Were you sad? Did you feel like sorry for yourself? Did you feel sorry for them?
I think that I obviously felt very lonely.
Hmm.
Um,
Did and your parents know about any of this, by the way?
so my parents separated when I was 15, and so when I was 16, I was living with my dad, single parent. He was
Mm.
starting, to date again. It was kind of a sort of a no rules type
Mm.
situation that, oftentimes happens
Hmm.
in these situations.
And your mom moved to Arizona, is
Yeah,
that
my mom
correct?
moved back to Arizona.
And why did you decide to stay with your dad and not go with your mom, if you don't mind me
Mostly
asking?
because of school, just
Hmm.
like that's where, I mean, and life in general. And I wasn't writing bad checks at that time.
Okay.
It was when I moved out of the house,
Hmm.
a
That
year
that
and a half
started.
later that it really started
Hmm.
to escalate. And yeah, I literally ran myself out of town. And then the heat was on. Like the police were, knocking on my door.
Mm.
They were trying, obviously, as mentioned, came to my work.
Right.
And what's really, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but all of the charges that I had brought against me, I should restart. Most of the charges that
Hmm.
I had brought against me were from the banks.
Hmm.
There were a couple of civil cases, from people who I wrote bad checks to, but by and large, most of those folks let it go, let it slide. And I think again, just showing that they cared about me as a
Hmm.
person and weren't trying to, even though I disrespected them so severely, they weren't trying to ruin my life,
Hmm.
But the flip side of having the banks come after you is that that's when law enforcement really starts to pay attention. And so,
And that's when you felt you had to leave.
yeah.
But did your dad know this was going on?
No, my dad and I at the time had a pretty estranged
Mm.
relationship. Honestly, more so just because of life, like again, he
Was
is
dating?
he's dating, I'm doing my own thing.
Mm.
He thinks that I'm just living life as a young adult. And yeah, so it very much came as a shock
Hmm.
to my parents when they discovered all of this.
And you were in New York at the time.
Yeah.
It was not. It wasn't until later.
Yep.
So okay. So you decided to move to New York. I imagine the boyfriend who took you to the bank eventually found out the truth. You guys broke up,
Yep.
and you were sort of feeling lonely, and you decided you were going to move to New York.
Yep.
Why New York?
I had some friends who lived there and they were like, this is the place for you.
Hmm.
And, at the time, social media didn't exist. So I really was able to leave to New York without the Utah part of it following me. At
Mhm.
least I thought. I
What
thought
year
so
was
much.
this, by the way?
This was 2008.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we were just starting to get Twitter.
Mhm.
Facebook and MySpace existed, but it was on a different level. It
Mhm.
wasn't on a lower level. It
Right.
wasn't, people weren't as addicted
Right.
to it at the time.
Mhm.
So I left, and again, this is just the, further proof that I was not thinking at all. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna leave Utah. I'll never come back, or whatever. That'll be fine. I did not think about how I had warrants for my arrest and that leaving the state is very illegal. I did not think,
Very
I
illegal.
was just like, survival.
Yeah.
How do I make it out? How do I, because it was exactly what people would think as far as, oh, I'm going to go over there and start a new life, right? Like, I'm going to get a legit job. I'll be in the city that I just know that I need to be in, all of the things.
I'll get my acts to get together, basically, is what you were thinking.
Yeah, I'll get my, I'll do things the way, if I'm going to be struggling, let's do it in a place where it'll be fun and everybody else is struggling too.
Right. Right.
And I remember the day that I moved, and I moved there without ever having visited. And I just remember being like walloped by the access to different cultures, different food, different people. And it was amazing, but it was super intense for me going from basically monoculture, right? One very specific culture to like everything. And part of what started to happen is that I was experiencing, I don't even want to say racism, but like, I mean, some of it certainly was, but I was experiencing being me, looking the way that I look in a totally different way. Some ways that was super positive, and I was like, I feel seen, And then in other ways, it was like, oh, yeah, people are still saying mean things to me. This time it's more loaded though, because it's a whole group of people that they're talking about that I now am starting to identify with more.
Such as
Just like things that were very specific to like go back to your own country, that kind of thing. I wasn't getting a lot of that in Utah because I think people.
Yeah, like smaller.
Yeah, it
vibes,
just wasn't, no one even thought of the country that I was from, they were just like, you're different.
Yeah.
But then when I got to New York, it was like some of these things were way more specific to my actual heritage. And that kind of threw me for a loop. And all of this is, in retrospect. I don't think I would have been able to verbalize any of this at the time, but it was just a whiplash, and it was exciting, and I loved the city. I just, immersed myself in the insanity of it. I did try to find a legitimate job, and ultimately I ended up getting one at Vice.
But before then,
But that being said.
Yes, exactly. Because before then, a lot happens, including you kept on saying you had a job that you didn't, right? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So
how did you make friends, and how did you pay for your life here in New York when you first got here?
So those are great questions. Because they were questions that I had that I didn't have the answers to, that I needed to discover the answers very quickly. And so, not being able to get a job as quickly as I thought I would,
Were you trying? You were?
Yeah, I was. But of course, it was with resumes that were, and listen, I think that we all know that everyone zhuzhes their
fake it till you make
it, up, but yeah, mine it was considerably zhuzhed.
So what, it had just like all these jobs that you never had?
Yeah, it was like, or things that I had done, but for different companies, because I always, part of the reason that I wanted to go to New York is that I love music, and I loved music, and Williamsburg specifically in Brooklyn, was well known for being sort of, the like hipster capital, indie rock scene, and I just always, I always wanted to be a part of that scene. I just thought that was like the coolest thing. I thought that was the way that I would be the coolest. And so I was lying about working for, some of these major festivals, production companies, that kind of thing. And I, was like, okay, well, I have to do something to make money. I have to pay rent. I have to eat, all of that. I have to survive. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do here? I don't want to be writing bad checks again. What can I do? And so I started to steal money from people, specifically white trust fund kids, who I would meet out at bars and at shows, and,
How did you know they were
like
trust
that.
funds?
So therein lies the issue, right? Is that there were things that I would, observe that would kind of lead me to that, I guess, conclusion. But there's no way that all of them were. Like they're just, I think that it was like, oh, they're wearing nice shoes. They have a nice watch. Sometimes it was again, not plotting. It wasn't like, I'm going to go out tonight and find someone to do this to. It would be like, I'm out. That person just went to the ATM. They didn't take their receipt. I'm going to go look at it, see what their bank balance is.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's pretty significant. Or even if it weren't that significant, it's pretty significant to me as like a 20-year-old, a poor 20-year-old in New York City. Like, I'm going to try to go home with that guy.
And that, in your mind, you were rationalizing it as, this person has a lot more than I do.
Yeah.
I deserve some of this as well, or was going through your
I don't even know if it was I deserve. I think it was more of just like,
I want it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I don't think that there was not a lot of entitlement in this for me. It wasn't again, I think in retrospect, I look at the people, and it's like, okay, these were all the kind of guys that I was told my entire life to, try to marry. They're the good ones, they're whatever it is. So yeah, I would go home with these guys. Again, throughout all of this, I'm me. I'm not using a fake name. I'm still my personality, which means that I am still like boisterous and ridiculous. And so part of the reason that this became such a big story, ultimately, is because I couldn't just, walk up to someone at the bar and flirt like a normal person. I had to write these like ridiculous notes that I was like sliding to people, trying to make them laugh, that just had like ridiculous lines.
Give me some. I know some of them. Okay, and they're really funny.
So I think the most popular one, the highest rate of success. I try not to use them more than once. I remember because I was like, no, I have to be original. That was always it, right? Is that I was like, I need to be the only me.
Yeah.
Like, I need to be
memorable.
Yeah. I need to be original. Right. So one of the lines was, I want to give you a hand job with my mouth.
And then you signed it. Is that the one you signed?
It? Yeah. So I was obsessed. I still to this day, I love basketball. Utah is a very basketball, it's a basketball town because we only had one professional sports team and the Utah Jazz. So I would sign it. I guess I was saying that I wasn't using a fake name when I met
I understood.
People,
yeah.
But I was signing things Korean Abdul-Jabbar after one of my favorite players and people in life. He's an amazing humanitarian, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
And so people would read these guys would read these messages. You'd be like at the end of the bar, like winking, hey, it was me? Or...
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it was sort of this like litmus test too. Of, like,
if this is a guy, like a smart guy that can get this joke.
Yeah. And like that was the other thing, is that it was like, well, again, if I had thought about this situation, it was like, why? It always had to be people that I still felt connected to, which is worse, I think, from like a manipulative perspective, right? Like I was specifically wanting the attention from the people that I wanted attention from.
Right. And that you liked, or that you found some sort of connection.
Exactly.
Right? Which in the end was bad because the ultimate result was bad for them.
Yeah, exactly. And, people have asked me, well, why didn't you just go like the sugar baby route or like the sex worker route? And that had never even crossed my mind. Like that was not a thing, I just had never, it felt like this was the only way.
But when you did go home with these guys at the start, did you think, I'm going to build a relationship with this person, fall in love with them, they might fall in love with me, I might actually marry this person? Or was it always, I know there wasn't like a master plan, but did you always think, I'm probably going to steal from this guy by the end of this night?
I don't think that I ever thought that far ahead. I think I was literally like, it was an in the moment kind of thing. There were times where, for example, I met this guy at a show, at a concert. We were both alone and then, making out during the show, whatever. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna take this person back to my home because
Mhm.
they lived in New Jersey. And so we're on the train and I remember him saying something, because I was like, well, what was your plan? Like, were you gonna go back home? Da, 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 da. And then I realized I was like, oh, this person was planning on meeting someone so
Huh.
that they had somewhere to stay
Uh-huh.
tonight. And I was like, oh, I don't like that. Which, I mean, pot calling the kettle black, right? Like, but I was like, oh, this
Mm.
person
Mhm.
had their own, sort of, I guess, like, scam. I don't know if I
Right.
thought of it that way at the time, but and that was a moment where I was like, okay, maybe I am gonna take advantage of this
Huh.
person. But
And did you?
yeah, I did.
What did you do?
I think I took, what did I take of theirs? Maybe their Metro card. That was the other thing, is by the time I was doing this in New York, I wasn't writing bad checks here. I was literally, it was like pocketing I almost said iPad,
And
pocketing an
I.
iPod. It was, taking a $20 bill from
Mhm.
them. It was like very, again, doesn't negate it, but like
Uh-huh.
petty theft. And
How did it happen? So you would go home with these guys,
yeah,
you'd sleep with them.
sometimes not.
Uh-huh. And
And
then at what point of the night are you taking stuff from their wallets or their
yeah, I mean,
pockets?
it really depended, right? Because again, it was so circumstantial, but it was like, okay, sometimes they'd be sleeping and I'd be like, I'm gonna sneak out of here, and
Yeah.
then like, oh, there's a $20 bill in the bowl that's next to their front door.
You take it out.
Yoink. Other times it was like, this is not going well. I don't like this person. Like, okay, I'm gonna go into their bathroom and like take, I don't know, like a cologne or whatever. It was almost like sometimes it didn't matter what it was. It was more of like the jab of
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
Uh, there were times for sure where I realized that they weren't as affluent, or, their situation wasn't what I thought. And I would, I guess in my mind, it was like, oh, I'm going to be gracious to them and not take
Not take
anything.
anything.
Uh, but yeah, there honestly wasn't a lot of thought put into it
Huh.
at
And
all.
like you said, I mean, the majority of it was like small amounts
Yeah.
and small goods. But what was the biggest amount or the biggest thing you ever took from somebody at that point?
I don't know what the biggest thing was, but the most meaningful for sure, that I felt very bad about was, so I mentioned an iPod. I took this person's iPod. I remember it being like, ooh, it's a brand new one. Great.
Mm.
And when I got home, was looking at it, and on the back, there was, it was engraved, and it was from a family member congratulating them
Mm.
for being the first in their family to graduate from college.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh my, like that one, so there
Hurt.
definitely, it's not like there wasn't remorse at the time, because there was not enough,
Hmm.
obviously, and not with everyone or for everyone.
Right.
But definitely times where I was just like, oof,
Maybe this wasn't
and
great.
I mean, the biggest thing, and you mentioned this in the intro, and this was something that was partially true, is that I did lie to a handful of people about having grave, serious illnesses.
Including cancer.
Yeah. And I don't recall saying that I was a survivor. I do recall saying that it was a current thing that I had.
That you had cancer.
Yeah.
It was cancer of the lungs or it was
Yeah,
all
it
sorts.
was lungs, and it was like, even that oddly had to be this thing where I was like, yeah, it's really crazy, rare, whatever, because I don't smoke. I don't smoke.
Mhm.
And pulling up a statistic of like, yeah, a very small percentage of people get it even though they don't smoke.
Hmm.
I can't believe I'm one of those people.
So would you research online on how to tell these lies well?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like super in depth, but it was like, yeah, if people asked, okay, so what stage, I had a response for that.
Mm.
Yeah.
And how do you remember the first time you said that? And now that time has passed, why do you think you were saying this? I mean, I guess for the same idea, it's this idea of wanting to be liked and attention paid and all
Yep.
that. But yeah, okay. So let's go to the first time you ever said. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it started actually. So when I was stealing things from people, it was always men,
Hmm.
which is part of the reason that, some saw and still see me as like a almost celebrated feminist, like anti-hero, you know? Uh, and maybe there was some of that in my mind at the time, but like I try not to think of things necessary in those ways. But the first time that I lied about having cancer was actually because there was a woman that I met that I fell in love with. And we were just friends. I, to this day, have no idea if she was at all queer. But she started dating this guy and I got really jealous and they were moving super, super quickly. And I remember that there was a time where...
Can I just ask you a question if
Yeah,
you
of
don't mind?
course.
Was it the first time you had feelings for a woman or has that existed?
No.
Because I actually remember something you said in your book that I thought was great and I wanted to share it here, which was that you faked being white, you faked being a good Mormon girl, you faked being straight.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I always knew, right? Like, even as a younger child, like when I started to have crushes, it wasn't necessarily only the boys. That being said, there was a huge period of my life where I did not acknowledge it because, you know, the church's teachings are that is, you know, I mean, yeah, I was basically just by being me, I was sinning a lot. And so I think that was also a part of it where it was like, okay, well, if I'm already a sinner, you know, why don't I do things that are actually advantageous to me, for me? So the first person, not the first woman that I loved.
Had you had a relationship with women before?
Yeah, I had. Yeah, okay. When I was actually during the time that I was writing the bad checks, there was a woman that I got casually dating. I wouldn't
in
say,
Salt Lake City.
Yeah, I wouldn't say in a relationship with necessarily, but this was the first person though that I was like, oh, they get me. Like they were they were biracial, and so we really bonded over the kind of like, well, which side are we supposed to be on? You know, are we, you know, because there's a lot of times where people would try to make you choose. Well, are you Asian or are you white? Right. And it was a different experience for both of us, but a shared one. And yeah, I just remember feeling very like it was just a very nurturing environment. And so anyway, she started dating this guy. It moved very quickly.
So this in New York. So then fast forward to New York and there's this person you like and she starts dating a guy.
Yeah, and she was, his parents were going to be in town. And I remember being like, she can't meet his parents. Like I don't know, for some reason in my mind that just felt like there will be no chance for me if she meets, because she was so in love with this guy, you know? And so I lied. I don't think that at the time I was saying that I had cancer, but I lied about being very sick. And I actually went to the hospital and lied to them about
being sick,
my symptoms and everything. And so I convinced this hospital, these doctors, these medical professionals, I mean, this is no shade against medical professionals, but like I convinced them that there was something very wrong with me, and they kept me there for a few days running all these tests.
Wow. You stayed overnight at the hospital? I stayed
overnight multiple nights.
What were you saying was wrong? Like we were saying, what were the symptoms that you were saying you had?
I mean, all kinds of things. I was like, you know, it's a little hard for me to breathe. I have pain, you know, in this certain area. All kinds of things.
That is so crazy.
The scans they would get the scans, like everything looks fine. And I'd be like, okay, but you know,
I feel it.
I feel it.
And was your friend with you at the time?
So my friend came to visit, and of course I had planned it.
So she missed the dinner with the
and I don't remember if it was a dinner, but yeah, she missed
or something, meeting the parents,
meeting the family.
Wow. Yeah. And so that was the beginning, and that was the first time, and then.
Yeah. And then I think it was a couple of other times. That was not honestly one of my like consistent lines.
But you did say it.
I did say it. That's the thing though that I feel, you know, a lot of this, you know, stories and articles about me, about all of this is so focused on the money, which by the way has been misreported to like a pretty varying degree.
How much money do you think you stole?
It was
in goods and money.
In goods and money, $10,000 to $15,000, let's say. That's also though from banks and from loan shark, check cashing places, which I mean, whatever. My agents love when I say this. I'll go on record saying I don't feel bad about that at all.
Right.
I feel bad about taking advantage of people. The banks, that's a different story. But, it wasn't a consistent line, the cancer. What I find interesting,
But is
though,
that the part that you're saying that you feel the worst about?
Yeah.
More than the money, it's the lying about the cancer?
And it's also just like, the money, that's not good. But at the same time, it's just money. And it was smaller amounts of money. I was always like, well, did I destroy these people's ability to have trusting, loving relationships? Like, are
Right.
these people going to be forever,
Yeah.
damaged and unable to trust people because of me? And I'm very fortunate because, again, I've been able to reconnect with a lot of people. And, they're just like, that was a crazy time.
Yeah.
They were like, that was a crazy time and you provided me with a really good story.
And when you reconnect with them, is it you reaching out and apologizing and saying, I'm so sorry this happened and this is what's bothering me, this idea that I might have taken trust away from you and, left you with a lifelong scar. Is that what you do? Or
honestly, there are a couple of people that I've reached out to, but for the most part, I let people reach out to me because, first of all, I'm pretty easily accessible. But more so, I think that some people just want to move forward and move on. And something I thought a lot about when writing this book, knowing that it was going to come out, knowing that people were going to say, oh, she should just capitalize, like further capitalizing on these crimes. But recognizing that, like, this might trigger people, right? To see that I'm doing this. So I've said publicly multiple times, if you're someone who I have wronged, please let me know because I do want to write it. And we can discuss what that looks like. And there have been a couple of people where they're like, you don't remember me. You might not remember me. And I'm like, no, I definitely do not remember you. And I'm like, is this person
real
actually, or are
not?
they not? Either way, like, I'm going to obviously treat them like they are, try to get some information to corroborate their story.
Why would you think people just would want to lie about that? Is it because they want to be part of the story that's now well known? Or
yeah, I mean, that was happening even back then, right?
Yeah.
Where it was like people, I remember in comment sections of articles would be like, oh, I met her at da-da-da, or like, I met her at this place and took her on a date. We went here.
And it was
and
bullshit?
I was like, that never happened.
Wow, that is crazy.
And there are times where it's like people
trying to scam yourself into a scam story. It's like serious.
And people have pretended to be me. It's
wow.
It kind of, I don't want to say, everything's a scam. That I will say. Like, in certain ways, everything is a scam.
Yeah.
Particularly when you look at our government and, the administration and healthcare and all kinds of things.
I mean, healthcare, 100%. Absolutely. So, okay. So this was happening. So then you started with the lies about having cancer. And then how did it progress from there? Or how did it hit a wall?
I got a job at Vice, and I remember I had like cold emailed them because I knew that I wanted to work for a company. When I was saying that I couldn't find a job, I definitely could have found a job. It's just that I wanted the cool job.
Right. Not the job. Yeah, you'd want
I didn't want to work at, and again, I truly believe there is only skilled labor, right? Like, every job, there's skill involved. But I was like, well, I'm not going to work at McDonald's. Like, I have to have the job. And so I cold emailed Vice and I was like, hey, I don't see any positions available, but here's my resume. And I, said some funny shit. And, this is why you should bring me in for an interview. And I got an email back being like, okay, can you come in? We're actually, interviewing for an executive assistant position for the editor-in-chief at the moment. come on by.
Wow. So who was it, Shane, or who was it?
No, it was Eric Lavoie. And so...
And so you were his executive assistant.
Yeah, that's for not very long, though.
No,
I was
not
there
very
for
long.
like 2 weeks.
Right.
Because ultimately what happened is that I was on a crosstown bus going to visit a friend. And I was scrolling on my like original iPhone. And I was scrolling through this website that still exists called Gothamist. And I remember scrolling, and then coming across my mugshot from Utah. Because I've never been arrested in New York.
But you were on a most wanted list from Utah, right?
Yes. So I did not know this, though.
You had no idea.
I had no idea.
Wow.
And this, again, I think is a testament to my stupidity, is that, again, I'm leaving Utah just being like, I'm going to start anew. While in reality, I am, and this is the term, absconding from justice.
Right.
You know, me being like 18, like 19, you know, like, whatever. Like, Utah has bigger fish to fry. Like,
right.
I'm just going to, you know, I had to have known that I was running from things. Like, I just thought, they're not going to.
It's not going to catch me.
It's not going to catch me.
Right.
I'm moving across the country, and I'm going to be a better person.
So you're on the bus, and then suddenly you see your face, and you're like, what the
I see
fuck?
my face, and there was no question about it. It wasn't like I was like, whoa, that person looks a lot like me. I was deeply familiar with my own mugshot, so I immediately was just like, oh, this is not good. And then I looked at the story, and it was basically what had happened is that Vice posted, and they were like, hey, here's a hot tip. Before you hire someone, maybe Google them to see if they're on a most wanted list or not. Because this executive assistant that we hired, or this person that we hired, was. And then they posted the wanted poster.
And they didn't actually contact you before doing this?
No. That was how, and then of course I didn't go in, and I never like communicated with them again. They shut all of my stuff down, and I jokingly say, but maybe they still owe me money for
the 2 weeks that you worked.
Last paycheck.
Yeah.
But again, I wasn't there for long.
I thought there was a story also with somebody there that you started sort of flirting with, and then that person, that's how they found out, right? Okay, so tell that story.
So, I mean, I don't remember the details. I'm sure that I was like flirtatious in the way that I am, in the sense that, like, again, it's also Vice, and it's Vice in, you know,
that time, which is
time period. So this is
pre Me Too movement. It was a very masculine culture.
Yes, there was a lot of exposure in kind of all ways possible.
Right.
It was like there was an HR department now would be very unhappy. There would be lawsuits. Right. And there were lawsuits. But so, you know, I was like, this is an edgy place. This is like, you know, they're so cool. I think I can be I was encouraged kind of to be crass, you know, and so a lot of my communication with people through, like, you know, the messenger system, I don't remember what we used.
Yeah, but like the internal messaging, whatever that it was.
You know, was like, I don't remember exactly what I was saying, but I'm sure that it was like funny and flirtatious. And then, of course, people will Google you. It wasn't as prevalent now to Google someone, you know, but they did. And
this person saw that you were on a most wanted list, and that there were stories about you out there.
Yeah.
And so okay, so you're in the bus, you saw this, and you're like, shit, this is the moment.
Yep.
Was it?
Yeah. And I was like, what do I do now? At the time, though, I didn't realize that it was going to blow up the way that it did, right? Because this was like one article, you know, pretty short, based on one blog post that Vice had posted that was relatively short. But then the Observer picked it up, the New York Observer, and the journalist, she bestowed the moniker Hipster Grifter, the Hipster Grifter, upon me.
How did that make you feel when you saw that?
Like every hipster, I was like, I'm not a hipster. That was like the part that I had more of a problem with.
I am a grifter, but I'm definitely not a hipster.
I'm like,
God damn it.
God. No, I think that I think I was like, oh, that's good. Like, not that I wanted to claim it, but I was
Mhm.
just like, I see
It's a
what the
good title.
journalist is doing here.
Yeah,
That is catchy. And
very.
I do remember also that at the time, people didn't know what either of those words
Hmm.
meant. So there were a lot of articles that had to explain what, grifter now, it's like so much a part of our vernacular.
Yeah.
Anyone
It,
we don't like, anyone who like we
mhm.
disagree with is a grifter, right? But at the time, it
Also, the
was
grifting industry has
exploded.
exploded in the last few years. So
Yeah.
yeah, it has become more part of our vernacular, like you said.
And a lot of, again, I had mentioned, but a lot of what was written about me, absolutely true. But there was a lot of misinformation. And
So what were the lies? What were things that
yeah,
weren't true?
it was everything from like my age, it varied, by 4 or 5 years. It was the amount of money.
Mm.
So that was a big one. And, I part of me is like, is it silly to care? And it's like, no, actually, it's a pretty, I feel, a legitimate
Mhm.
concern. The warrants for my arrest, the state of Utah, the warrant for the arrest was $60,000.
Mhm.
But a lot of people took that number and attributed it to the amount that I had taken, which is not
It
the
wasn't the
way
case.
that works. And so, it was reported that I stole anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000. And a lot of the stories were written by, middle-aged white men.
Mhm.
So a lot of them were focused on the way that I look. And I don't want to say it was only journalists, that demographic. It was a lot of different
Mhm.
kinds of people, types of people. But yeah, much of it focused on, it was either kind of like, look at this subservient Asian girl who's flipping the script and like becoming the dragon lady.
Mm.
It was very
Oh
rooted
wow.
in racism, very, very much my sexuality was highlighted, and again,
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because even I highlighted it. I brought it up. I brought it up, and
yeah,
because it was so much of when I was doing the research that was part of it. I mean, a lot of it was like how flirtatious with it
yes,
you were, how many guys you had sex with to then
yep,
steal their money, how you're being attracted to women, and how that played into the story. Yeah, that's in all the stories that I
yeah.
read.
I mean, I remember, I will put them on blast every day. The Philadelphia Inquirer, I am so glad that the Wayback Machine exists because
Mhm.
I have a screenshot of this because it's like no one would believe, I mean, maybe they would. The news is, I mean, everything's a scam,
Yeah.
right? But back then, people were less critical of and suspicious
Mhm.
of the news. People took what journalists had to say and what was reported, either by journalists or not, as truth. And so I remember the Philadelphia Inquirer, which is a legitimate
Yeah.
newspaper, um, had like a post edit and it was like, and before you ask, here's a link to her like NSFW photos. And they literally linked to like thought shots, like to nude pictures
Oh
that had been
wow.
released by an ex-boyfriend. It like
Whoa.
leaked. They weren't even things that I had put on the
Right.
internet. And I just remember being like, this is like
Yeah,
I
like
don't
a
even know that I
reputable
remember what to.
newspaper, like you were expecting this from some salacious magazine, but not from this.
Yeah, and again, I don't think it was until much later that
Mhm.
I really realized how fucked up that
That
is.
is fucked up.
I was doing the cut. New York Magazine was doing a feature on me, and I had brought this up. And the journalist, Bindu Bansanov, had contacted the
Journalist
journalist
from the
who wrote it,
Inquirer,
and
yeah.
he was, to his credit, I guess, was so ashamed that he
Oh,
had
he
done that
was.
and was like, do you want me to get it taken down? At the
Mhm.
time, I actually don't know if this article is still out there, but, asked if we wanted him to do it. I was like, no, leave, you are like, this is years and years later.
Right.
But also, like, that's wild that
Yeah,
that's how we were treating women in the public eye at that
I
time.
think that's how you treat people in headlines often,
Yeah.
particularly con artists and people who are in the headline, or even not. Like I was reading the other day with a woman who kissed her guy from work, her coworker, or actually her boss from in the
Yeah.
Coldplay concert. and the way she was treated. And I remember, I think many times you just see the title or the headline and you don't understand sometimes that there's a person behind it and that there's a story there and that there's a human being. And I think people are really callous with the way, and myself included, that we are very callous sometimes with the way we talk about people. And so when you finally see that there is a human being, like reaching out to the journalist from the Philadelphia Inquirer, maybe he didn't even cross his mind that, I'm like really this person, for all she has to blame, for everything that she did wrong, she definitely doesn't deserve to have nude photos of her out there without her consent.
Right.
And nobody does.
Right.
So that's where I think there was a disconnect there between the hipster grifter and the Kari Ferrell, you know?
And I do remember being like, oh, they're not even good ones.
Yeah.
I was like, if they had been ones I put out, they would have been way better.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's especially like how we treat women, right? Specifically, like, you know, this was the time period of you know, Britney Spears being hunted down by the paparazzi. But it was also very telling and interesting because my crimes, let's say I had stolen $60,000, which again, I hadn't, but let's just say it was that number. I'm still being put on a most wanted list with people who have committed very, very, very serious crimes. And then these stories are major national headlines next to articles about Bernie Madoff and what he's doing.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So it's like, what about my story can even compare to that?
Right.
And it's like, well, you know, I mean, to be fair, it's very entertaining. And I think it was interesting for other people who were part of the music, you know, hipster subculture, because it was kind of the first time that they had been represented, or that it had been represented in a negative way, I guess, in a way. Like, and so it became this thing that all of these people also started participating in, because the first, you know, week when the article had come out, I went into hiding because I was like, my face is fucking everywhere now. Like, I don't know that people realize. So this was, again, you know, before a lot of social media existed. And so the news cycle was a lot slower. Stories stayed very prevalent for a lot longer. If something happened like this now, it would be, you know, a day or two and then moving on. But because this was the first real viral scam story, it stuck for a very long time.
So you went into hiding at somebody's house?
And I went into hiding at someone's house.
Like a friend of yours?
Yeah, a friend of mine.
Who at this point you had confessed to, you told them, yes, this is real, this is happening, and that friend still was trying to help you.
So it actually was just I got lucky because I lived with this friend and he ended up having to go out of town during this time. So I was there by myself. So they actually, they never knew at that time that all of this was happening.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just really, it was really interesting. I think that, you know, the state of Utah sort of saw this as a media moment. And they also, I think, saw it as, wow, if we don't nab this woman, we're going to look like imbeciles.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, like I was telling you earlier, it was sort of astounding to me how much time and effort went into researching my own life and my own memories, because I did want to. I mean, this book is as truthful as it can possibly be. And the reason I say it that way is because obviously memory is fallible, right? Like, but I did a lot of research to corroborate things, and I looked at the most wanted posters with all of the, you know, and it's like, okay, here I am. And so, I ultimately ended up, you know, there were groups of people, you know, peers of mine who were putting together these search parties to look for me.
Oh, wow.
As like a fun activity, right? There were, I think it's hard for people to understand how big at the time this was. Like, there were posters of me, like, wheat pasted around, not even wanted posters, just like people, because...
like, have you seen this woman kind of thing?
No, more of like they would take a movie poster for crank
Uh-huh.
and like, you know, superimpose my face on it. And it was like, they changed the tagline to be like, you know, she's going around and she's going around and scamming dumb hipsters. Like, it was very pro me, honestly. You know, matchbooks that I had written on notes were being like
Sold and
on
auctioned.
eBay.
Yeah.
Crazy, crazy, crazy things. Like, you know, again, I guess the claim to fame is sort of that it was the first real viral.
It's
story.
interesting. It's this moment where you're like losing a lot of friends, right? But at the same time, you're gaining a lot of attention, but also lots of people pretending they have been your friends or wanting to be close to you because now you're this like famous story and famous person that everybody's talking about, right?
Yeah. And like I was already clearly like fucked up in the head, right? Processing, not processing. And so that just added to it, right? Because it was like, oh, I thought, you know, I want to be accepted. I want attention. Now I'm getting it. And I don't want it anymore. At least not like this.
Right. I was going to ask you how that felt because as somebody who always wanted attention, now you had it. But yeah, it didn't feel good. It wasn't
didn't feel good. And it was like, you know, I think that it was realistically what I always wanted was the semblance of control. And so this felt, I mean, this very much wasn't. It wasn't
you telling the story anymore.
Right. And after being in hiding, literally, like hat, sunglasses to like run to the bodega.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Literally to get food.
Yeah. To get my like 25-cent bagel and chips. I like thank the bodega, like the owner in the acknowledgments because I was like, you literally like kept me alive at that time by like.
Did he know who you were?
He had no idea, but just was like taking pity on me looking like a mess and being like, yeah, you clearly need some food. Give me a quarter. But
so he gave you the food for almost
like,
free.
Almost free.
Because you went there and you said, hey,
Because I think that was the only place that I was going for like a week. And I was getting, you know, a bagel with butter and like a bag of chips. So I think he was like,
that's
clearly
nice.
something's happening here. But yeah, I ultimately realized that there was no way that I was going to be able to live any sort of life without taking care of this. Like it was impossible. You know, I don't know if at the time it was very self-serving. You know, I don't necessarily think that I was like, I need to right the wrongs. It was more of like, what does my future look like? And so I had friends who were in a band and they were based out of Philly and they were going on tour and they were going to, one of the stops was Salt Lake. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have a final hurrah, like not in the sense of like stealing, but like I'm going to have a good time and I'm going to go on tour with them. And then when we get to Utah, the idea was, you know, that I would turn myself in, but that I was going to have a great time between, you know, Philly and Utah. So arranged all of that. And then when I got off of like the $1, you know, Chinatown bus that took me from New York to Philadelphia, there was a group of police there.
In New York?
In Philadelphia.
How do they know?
So there are multiple versions of the story, but they were tipped off by someone in the band that I was coming.
Holy shit.
And they didn't arrest me immediately. It wasn't a thing where legally they were allowed to do that. But I knew what was going on, so I went and spoke to them and was just like, okay.
Did you ever find out who in the band?
There was a person who claimed it actually, like wrote an article, but I don't know. And that was the other thing is that they, I think, thought that they were going to get a lot of love from being the person who quote unquote turned me in. But I remember like a lot of the comments being like, why would you do that? Like, really? You're gonna, whatever. Either way, that's really what started, you know, this road to redemption. But I want to be very clear that the redemption for me, I don't believe that it came from being incarcerated. I believe that it came from the people I met while I was incarcerated. And there's a big difference.
Not from the system itself, but by the people.
Right.
I hear that constantly. And I have a hard time believing. I mean, I don't think the prison system in America redeems anyone.
No.
And that's not even their goal, it seems like.
No,
it should be, but that's not. Yeah, their goal is to make money.
Because they do. And they make a lot of it off of every single person.
Yeah, there's a crazy statistic that for every dollar you put into the education of people in prison, it's $5 that you save from actually having them incarcerated, because recidivism drops dramatically once you actually leave prison more educated the statistics are all there, and it's just, I think, a lack of will and seeing people who are in prison as not deserving, which I think is wrong.
And a lot of people don't realize that. These privately owned prisons, which is just like, they're a scourge.
Is that where you were detained?
Mm-hmm. I was in one of those. So not only are they making money from the government for each person, but that it's what they call a pay to stay state. And so the inmates are literally charged for every day that they're incarcerated, and that is part of their restitution. So you're putting people in a position who are typically, financially insecure already, and then letting them out with nothing. It's very difficult to get a job as a, person with a record.
So wait, so if you're paying for being in prison, essentially, do you owe them money once you leave the prison? Yeah. How much did you owe?
I honestly cannot remember. And it's funny because on the way here, I was looking up stats to see if I could remember how much it was per day. For Utah right now, it's anywhere from $35 to $45 a day. I can't remember what it was for me at the time, but it was
significant.
I mean, and I was there for almost a year. So that's we're really setting people up to
was there a trial that happened, or what? Tell me about that. So you're
Philadelphia,
right?
I was there for about a month. And I remember the law is like, because I didn't do anything in Philadelphia, they were holding me for Utah. And Utah had, I think it was 30 or 31 days to come and get me. And I remember it was like day 28 or something. And I was like, oh, maybe
they're not going to come.
Maybe they're not coming. Sure enough, they did. And so I was literally handcuffed on a plane, like Con Air, except for it wasn't just a plane of cons. It was it was like a domestic American flight. Like it was like, or Delta. I don't remember what it was.
Were you chained? You had handcuffs and chained?
They gave me this massive windbreaker. It was like from the 90s. It was like all these like bright colors. I was like, great, totally like not gonna attract attention with this. But they had cut holes.
But suits the hipster look, maybe.
You know what? I haven't ever thought about it that way, but absolutely. That was definitely like from the same Salvation Army that I used to shop at. But they had cut a hole in the pocket so that I could be handcuffed but not visible. I mean, if you knew what was up, clearly they're like they're plain clothes, but like
big guys.
People, like it was actually a woman and a man, but flanking me, like walking, obviously. But I sat in the very, very back of the plane. Obviously, like the flight attendants knew what was going on. And I was shipped back to extradited, back to Utah. And something about it, I would love to know how much money the state of Utah spent on not just getting me back, but on everything. Because I guarantee, and I guarantee it was a lot more than
you actually
anything I ever took, for sure. But again, I had a lawyer tell me, the judge wants to throw the book at you because they want to make an example out of you.
Yeah, I think in many ways they see, even if we're paying more money than she actually stole, in many ways it's also prevention, right? And it's enacting the laws, and they see it. We have to get. She broke the laws. She has to. She broke the law. She has to be in.
But they put a lot of time and effort and money into it that they don't for everyone.
And you don't think that would have happened if you hadn't become suddenly national news in any way, right?
Absolutely. regardless of who I am, what I look like, whatever, if it hadn't been a big news story, there's no way that they would have
Right.
spent the time to find me.
Right.
It probably would have been I would never be able to go back there. But yeah.
And so you arrived in Salt Lake City, and then there was a trial, or did you plead guilty? And
yeah, so I mean, there were, I guess, yes, there was a trial, but it wasn't because, again, it was the banks who were filing
not
the
civil
charges,
suits. Yeah,
not.
I mean, there
were a couple of
people.
civil suits, but yeah, for all of the felonies and everything, it was these banks. So it was like the state of Utah versus me. And so basically, you go through the process of appearing in court so many times. Dates are getting canceled, rescheduled constantly. So you're really in a state of limbo. And I was, again, super fortunate that I was able to find an attorney that, quite honestly, I was like, listen, there's a story here. Do you, you're a good attorney, but is there any possible way that you would cut me a little bit of a deal because there's a moment here, right? And he was kind enough to do so. But there are a lot of people who can't, and they have public defenders, which are, for the most part, they're saints, but they're overworked, they're overloaded.
Yeah,
you
absolutely
can't pay as much attention to every single person, and so yeah, I was very fortunate. But even still, it took months and months and months and months for me to be sentenced, and
you were spending that time where?
In mostly the Salt Lake City
Jail?
Adult Detention Center, the ADC. And I say mostly because I had written some checks in other counties. And so there were sometimes I'd be for like 3 or 4 days at another jail in a different county taking care of those charges. For the most part, once I was sentenced, I had already been in jail for a significant amount of time. So they did give me that time counted toward the sentence.
The sentence itself.
Yeah.
And so you only spent a few more months after that.
Yeah. So I was there for, in total, it was like 10 and a half months, that stint. There had been, a couple in Utah prior to me leaving, which is how and why I had a mugshot to begin with. So yeah, but that was the long haul.
And was what for the sentencing? Were your parents there?
No. Media was, though. Yeah. My parents, they were put through it in so many ways as well, because they had, I cannot stress how crazy it is to me how big this got, because there were journalists knocking on their door. My mom lived in Arizona, a state totally unrelated to all of this, and people were calling them, so it was really, it would have been traumatic for them anyway, being a parent who the child you care about and love is going through it. But yeah, it was on another level.
And what was your relationship with them at the time?
At the time, it was they supported me throughout, as far as like communicating with me, letters. Yeah, they would answer the phone when I called. They were putting money on my books sometimes. But really, it was a lot of time to reckon with all of the relationships that I had destroyed, including, the one with my parents.
There's an interesting moment in, I think, your book where you talk about how, as a kid still, the people would go up to you, or this one woman, I think it was in a supermarket, she went up to you and said, that something that made you feel like you were lucky to have been adopted by this wonderful white couple, and that made you feel like you now sort of for the rest of your life had to live up to that, right? Can you talk a little bit about that, and how that relates to then being in prison and how you felt about that?
Yeah, so that's pretty much the story, is that I remember sitting in the car, my mom, shopping, and someone came up to us and was just like, "Oh, you're so lucky that your parents saved you."
Wow.
And
you were like, how old at this point?
I mean, I was young enough to be sitting in the front of the car. You know what I
Wow.
mean?
Yeah.
So like
The little
small
shopping
enough to
cart. Yeah.
sit.
Right. Wow.
And but that was like one occurrence of many, you
Mhm.
know, and it's people who meant well, obviously they were, but it was very much I grew up feeling not only like so many parts of me were just wrong and again a sin, but also that if I ever questioned my feelings around my adoption or adoption in general, that I was being ungrateful.
Mhm.
And that, you know, so that is definitely a good example of being able to feel multiple ways
Right.
about a
Yeah,
thing.
there's this enormous pressure already when you're growing up, right? But having to also make sure that you're not disappointing your parents because in so many ways you were so lucky that they saved you,
Yeah.
which is not the case, but that's how that was instilled in you at such a young
Yeah.
age. Yeah, that must have weighed so heavily on you.
It weighed very heavily on me and it still does. That's something that, you know, my hundreds of hours of therapy have been dedicated to.
Mhm.
But I think a big thing too, though, is for adoptive parents. You know, sometimes it's hard for them when their child wants to discover more about their origin because you know they feel like maybe they're being
Not happy.
replaced
Yeah.
or whatever it
Right.
is. It's complicated, but I think something that I want to stress, especially for you know a lot of these Korean adoptions, is that everyone was a victim.
Mhm.
Like adoptive parents were victims. Like it was, you know, sometimes I do wonder, okay, why an Asian baby specifically, right?
Mhm.
Like, did you want people to know immediately that they
Mm.
had adopted? Was it like you just thought Asian babies were the cutest? Like, beyond that, though, you know,
Mhm.
everyone had been lied to. So I think that again, people were just doing the best they could at the time.
Mhm.
And we just did not understand the importance of, at least where I was, didn't understand the importance of culture.
Mhm. Do you think you're free of that now? This idea of owing them something?
No, I think that's a tough one. I still, there's so many times where I'm just like, oh my God, no, you can't feel that way. You know, like you can't be upset or confused about this. Like, you know, and it's like, no, actually, I can
Mhm.
because it is confusing and it is upsetting. But
Mhm.
it's also like beautiful and loving and all of the things.
Yeah, with like any relationship with parents and families.
And I think that's what's like really the thing about my story is yes, I took so many things to the nth degree, but ultimately it's very relatable in a lot of ways, right? Everyone knows what it feels like to not be accepted,
Mhm.
to be teased, to wait for the other shoe to drop. Uh, you know, and unfortunately, especially now, people know what it feels like to be in financial distress
Mhm.
of like, wow, if I lost my job, I would have to do something probably pretty drastic to
Mhm.
be able to pay rent next
Right.
month. What would that look like?
Right.
And I'm not saying that's necessarily where I was at,
Right.
but I think it's easy for people to see, okay, you know, sometimes people are in a state of mind where it's just kind of like, gotta do what you gotta
Gotta
do.
do, right.
You know?
So prison, you said, mentioned many times, not prison itself, but the people inside changed you. Can you explain
Yeah.
that? Like what kind of people did you meet and what impact did that have on you?
Yeah. I mean, I met all kinds of people. However, just because, again, statistically, a lot of those people were women of color.
Hmm.
And so in Utah, a lot, you know, just with the proximity to the border,
Mhm.
there were a lot of people who were going through I mean, you know, immigration issues
Mhm.
that I just saw that were, it was so unfair. They were being persecuted more so because of the status that they did or did not have
Hmm.
as far as citizenship goes or, you know, whatever that may be. And obviously, we're seeing that on, you
On
know,
display
on
by our
display
government. Mhm.
now. It was a lot of people, you know, I write about it, but you could see people who had the same exact charges as you know a white woman, and they were getting much heavier and longer
Hmm.
uh, sentences.
Times, yeah.
So it was that. It was seeing people who were there for assault when, they were defending themselves from a domestic abuse situation. I remember
that
there was
happens a lot.
one woman who had a charge that was assault with a weapon or like battery or I can't remember what the exact charge was, but it was because she hit this guy with a hairbrush.
Oh, wow.
And that became a weapon.
Whoa.
And she was simply just trying to get herself and her children out of a tough spot. And that's the other thing is that I think it's 54% of women who are incarcerated have kids. So you're, destroying these families. And people are, again, very quick to say, well, didn't they destroy it themselves because they're the ones who did the, committed the crime? And it's like, if only things were so straightforward.
Right. And I think people also are always very curious about the danger inside prisons and the gangs and all of that. But what in your case, where were sort of, or were there any sort of displays of kindness and humanity?
Gosh,
and can you tell me some of those cases?
So many. And then I can tell you a fun
dangerous one.
Dangerous story. But yeah, kindness constantly. Like, I mean, everyone, yes, you are in it for yourself and you're looking out for yourself first and foremost, but everyone, at least, where I was, which was in multiple facilities, everyone just wanted to help. And that's not to say that they weren't gaining something by helping you. Sometimes it was more of an exchange, but what relationship isn't,
Right, exactly.
But really it was people like, oh, you don't have money on your books? I'm going to buy you some ramen noodles. It could be, trading library books. It could just be being there for one another to talk to. I mean, I remember birthdays would come and, we would be, quote unquote, baking cakes by, getting all these different treats on commissary and smashing them together. Like, there's a lot of also jailhouse ingenuity that
absolutely
people make stuff happen.
I want to hear the danger story, but there's something you said about how for so long you always felt different, but in prison was the first time. Can you say that, or can you explain that you felt like you were part of something larger?
Yeah, there was like a weird acceptance, right? Of like, okay, we're all sort of at the bottom of of this hierarchy.
Of society in many ways, right?
It's like, okay, well, we band together and we look out for one another and we cry with one another when people are given these crazy sentences or when people's children are sick or I mean, there were so many instances of things that happen on a day-to-day that because you don't have the access to communication, media, whatever, that you're just sort of left in the dark and you're left to your own devices, and the only other people you have consistently are the other
women or the other inmates. They become your family. So everything that they're going through matters tremendously to you.
And I think in women's prisons specifically, unfortunately, a lot of women have been sexually assaulted. So then you put them in situations where they're basically living in fishbowls, and the majority of corrections officers, in the police force are men. So you're putting them in situations where men are just watching them all the time. Like, how is that doing anything how is that safety? How is that, and I don't feel that any of these places are made for people, but especially not for women.
And women who have been abused. And
women who have been abused.
Did you ever feel that sort of power dynamic, or did you ever feel unsafe on that perspective?
It's so fascinating because I was almost on the opposite end of the spectrum because my case had media attention. The guards were very nice to me. Like, I remember there was one who would like play music for me over the intercom, like into my cell, like that kind of stuff.
Oh, wow.
Whereas, then you would see, I guess I don't like to, but the regular everyday inmate. And no one was getting it.
No,
It's just like
you
the
were treated differently
imbalance.
because you were kind of like famous, right?
Yeah.
You were like the famous person in prison. Yeah.
Sure.
So I understand that. And tell me about the dangerous story then.
Yeah. So in Philadelphia, was, I guess the best comparison is it was like Orange is the New Black, right? Where you have ironically, some freedom to like walk around, right? You're not always handcuffed. When you leave your pod, you can freely walk to the library or whatever. Utah was, even though I was a nonviolent offender, we were in our cells for the majority of the day. We got out anywhere from like 4 to 6 hours a day.
Wow. Again, how is that reforming people, right? How is that working on them and making them better people for when they leave prison, right?
Interestingly enough, one of the things that you were allowed to get out of your cell for was yoga, which I appreciate that they had, but also, religious things and activities and groups, and so many of them are Mormon. And so, there were a lot of people who were getting converted while incarcerated, which is not by design. But in Philadelphia, we had much more, freedom to sort of, be in other people's cells as well. Get your hair done, that kind of thing. But that also meant that the inmates were able to band together more so in ways that you aren't when you're fully isolated. And so, there were situations where, things would happen, interactions between corrections officers and some of the women there, and a full-blown riot took place.
Oh, shit.
Which was so crazy. And I was terrified. Like, this was not a thing that I don't know if anyone ever expects to be in this position, but I certainly was like.
So the inmates sort of turned against the COs?
Yes, yeah. And ultimately, there were, people using their lunch trays as shields.
Wow.
The COs called backup, so there were, a dozen people in riot gear coming in, trying to come in.
Wow. What were you doing at this point?
And I was panicking. I was kind of frozen in place, just what the fuck is going on? Also, what do I do? Like, also, what can I do? And someone took care of me. They were like, come on, let's get you into your cell. Go and sit down. Like,
another inmate, you mean?
Yeah. Like, let's get you out of this, because basically, they didn't say this, but essentially it was like, you're not ready.
Ready for
you're not
this.
Capable.
Right.
You're not capable of taking care of yourself in this situation. So yeah, and it was over very quickly, and but that was wild.
Yeah, that is fucking
totally
wild. Did you write about it in the book?
Write about it,
I can't wait to get to that part.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And then you'll see how it all came to be, because it wasn't just out of the blue. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will read it.
Teaser for the book.
I love it. Making people want to read it.
Hopefully.
And then you left prison, and you had a really hard time. Can you tell me a little bit about that period? And is it true that you were homeless at one point too?
Yeah. So when I got out, I was like, okay, what am I going to do with my life? Like, I was being contacted, by a lot of different publications, by production companies wanting to make documentaries. One of the things that I used to flex while I was incarcerated was that I was talking to Inside Edition. And so, I was on the phone with them a lot. They were sending me things, and that was like such a, like, ooh, look at me.
Like sending you gifts?
Not gifts, but just like information, like packets, questions, like things to sign if I wanted to participate, So
they were hoping to do an interview with you once you left.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they did. We actually ended up doing it. But yeah, when I got out, I was like, okay, so I either have to like fully lean into being this character, right? This person.
Yeah, like a celebrity con artist, essentially. Yeah.
Because it was
or a former con artist, by the way.
But really, I could be former as much as I want. Even still to this day, people sometimes choose to,
call
it's
you
like
a con artist.
they don't, and I, know also media and entertainment, the landscape, it's like, yeah, sometimes you have to kind of lean
Mm-hmm.
into that a little bit. So sure, call me a con artist if you want, but now my con is like to go up against, the real scammers.
I like it.
But I didn't know what I was going to do, and I just wanted to like
Mhm.
fade into obscurity because I was, yeah, over it, but like I didn't want to be known as just that person. Even though I think that I probably could have like made a decent living off
Mhm.
of it. I mean, other people have gone on to show that that's totally possible, but that's not what I wanted. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna get my shit together. I knew that I wanted to come back to New York. So I requested a transfer for my probation and was able to come back. And but while I was still in Utah, because it took a while to get that approval, I was homeless. And so I literally was like finding people to stay with on Craigslist, that those
Mm.
were not good situations. It's
Mm.
like staying with, random
Yeah.
couples, random men, and I think it's just a good example of showing how hard it can be to even attempt to do the right thing,
Mhm. Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. Yeah. The system is stacked up against you. I think when you leave prison, very much so. It's
Very
very
much
hard to.
so. And I was fortunate because I actually met my partner, who we've been married for almost 15 years.
Oh, I didn't know you were married.
Yeah,
That's great.
we met while I was in Utah on probation.
Huh.
And he was one of the first people that I was just like, okay, I'm gonna be straight up honest with you. Like, here's what's going on. Here's who I was/am.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I mean, it has, I joke that we were the kind of crazy that worked.
Uh-huh.
My crazy worked with his
Huh.
crazy. And, we have an amazing life and kind of architected it to be the way that we want it to be, both with our relationship, but also just the way that we move through the world
Mhm.
together and separately.
Mhm.
But he was a big part of why I was able to get out of my homeless situation, was because
Mhm.
we helped each other really get back on the right path.
And then you both moved to New
And
York
then we both moved
together
to New York,
then.
but he actually, former military, and so at the time was working for a contractor, as ultimately the Department of Defense. So the first 2 years of our relationship, he was in Afghanistan.
Huh.
Yeah, so
Wow.
it was, there's a lot, there are a lot of similarities with
Mhm.
being incarcerated and being in the military.
Mhm.
Like, so we bonded over a lot of that.
And you said when you came out, you had a lot of opportunities to be on TV and do shows, but you
Yeah.
decided you didn't want to at the time. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel right to make money out of something that ultimately you felt shame around.
It
Right.
was that, and it was just like knowing that I didn't want to be known for this
Right.
thing. And, I'm sure there will be listeners, viewers who are like, haha, well, you wrote a book about it, but it's like, yes, 15, 16 years later,
Right.
this was not, I had taken a lot of time to process all of this
Mhm.
and really come to see, you know, yeah, that, I mean, obviously I knew what I was doing was wrong, but really to see how and why, and again, the long-term effects of those things. And I think in many ways, oddly enough, like the media controlled my own narrative about myself
Right.
at that during those periods of time. And now I'm able to see like, hey, I do actually have an interesting story. And I have such an interesting story on its own that I never needed to lie. But I never felt like it was good enough on its own, or,
Mhm.
whatever. And so, yeah, now I mean, my work is really dedicated to, again, talking about all of these issues and things I care about, but
Including prison reform, right?
yep, that's a big one. Advocacy around that and the judicial system and
Right.
the carceral state in general. Other human rights issues, obviously, a lot of things around, LGBTQ plus
Mhm.
issues. especially coming from the state of Utah.
Right.
Uh,
I think that's so awesome that you are being able to then use your platform and even the things that you did wrong, but turning it around and then using it as like a platform to make changes and
yeah.
to talk about things that are important for you.
Yeah, all through dark comedy and like
Yeah.
a salacious internet presence. Because I kind of find that ironic in a lot of ways, that I'm doing kind of the same things that made the story so popular and big to begin with, but now for a purpose.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate, first of all, that people are so open
Mhm.
to, me doing this and wanting to listen. And again, so appreciative for anyone and everyone who reads my book, whatever, follows me, but I just don't see the point in any of this if not trying to make things better for others,
Mhm.
especially those from marginalized communities. And really, to be totally honest with you, and this is not to say that I haven't loved this conversation, but I'm so over telling my story. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I,
And I can see that through it, you're trying to process constantly, and every word you're saying, you're trying to sort of explain yourself, but also then not trying to make it feel like you're trying to come up with too many excuses for why you
right.
did with what you did. And there must be a lot of pressure in that too.
It's a lot of pressure. And it's also like, my whole thing is, okay, that's what made, like, sure,
Mhm.
but now let's look to the future.
Yeah.
What is happening? And so I, through dark comedy, I truly believe in education through entertainment.
Yeah.
I think that it's so easy to like an Instagram carousel, you're like agree with every single word, but then if someone asks you 5 minutes later, what did that say? Like you
You
can't
can't
remember.
remember, right?
But if you really connect with something like a piece of art, that's how
Yeah.
people absorb information. So I have a production company called Without Wax, and I really want to concentrate on telling other people's
Hmm.
stories, specifically, other queer women of color, but just anyone. I think that mine has very much served an incredible purpose. And I'm like, all right, what's next? And that's really, again, I think I've always been a storyteller for better or worse. Um, and mine is, yeah, I just,
Yeah.
I,
What do you hope your impact is in the world? What do you hope your story will tell in the that's a big
yeah, that's a good
question.
question.
But yeah, what do you want to leave behind?
I hope I would love to get to a point where I'm able to make real actual change within legislation.
Mhm.
Is that going to be possible? I don't know, but I would like to have made a difference in those ways, but at the very least in just getting people to think about things in through a different lens, in a through a more compassionate lens. I think a lot of times some of the facts and things that I talk about these places people don't realize, again, like the pay to stay aspect of it,
Yeah,
the
I had no idea, and I've reported a lot on prisons.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just, moving the needle toward a more compassionate society, and looking at why we see punishment the way that we do.
Mhm.
um you know you mentioned it earlier, it's like how could we expect, treating people this way for them to be able to get out and do what they need to do to live productive lives.
Right.
Like, so yeah, really just I think I have a very unique perspective on all of this, on life,
Hmm.
honestly, in general, because it's been a wacky one.
Hmm.
And the hits just keep on coming. Like I've chaos attracts chaos. And there's no getting around that. I have just learned how to channel the chaos into productivity.
Hmm.
And I think that's so important. And that's also something that has to be taught. So I would really love for my work to showcase that.
Hmm.
And maybe there's someone out there where this can be a sort of cautionary, in the beginning, cautionary tale, but then I don't know, uplifting one, in the sense that, like, yeah, you can move forward.
Right. And a story that shows nuance and shows, all the spaces in between.
Yeah. I think that, and I'm not thinking of anyone in particular, but, there are like times where I get contacted a lot where it's like, oh, there's this new scammer out. Do you want to talk about them? Like, it's just like, oh, well, you're a grifter. They're a grifter. What do you have to say? And it's like, I rarely, I don't think I've ever actually done one of those. But it's like, people will take their own paths and they can do what they want. But I feel very strongly about if you have a platform, you need to
use it for good.
You need to be doing something with it that makes some sort of change, because again, like I'm so fortunate, but now I just get to work with all of my friends who are the most amazing, incredible, smartest, hottest, creative people in the world. And, I can't forget that I put in a lot of work to be that great friend, to be that great partner, to be, and of course I still have faults. Like, I think that's the other thing is it's like no one, like you can change, but you shouldn't want to change everything, and you shouldn't just based upon like ideological stuff. Like, I think it's so interesting when we talk about like, okay, this is a new chapter. Like, okay, sure, maybe it's a new chapter, but it's the same book. So like, let's not pretend like
that this didn't happen. Yeah.
That this didn't happen. And I, again, am lucky because I'm in a place where I can own it fully.
Yeah.
And it's an asset in some ways. But there are a lot of people who can't.
Right.
Because it will end their careers, or it will make it impossible for them to, for their kid to get into a certain daycare. Like it really extends beyond the individual.
Right. Yeah. And I think that not everybody who even is able to own their own stories ends up doing it. So I commend you for that, and commend you for telling your own story in such a funny way, which is even better. And I really enjoyed talking to you. I love how you're vulnerable, how you've obviously done the work in looking at the stuff you do. I also understand that you're really fed up of talking about this. So I appreciate you giving us the time to sharing your story again.
Thank you so much. And I again, I didn't mean to sound flippant or anything. It's just like, okay, this is, I love having these kinds of conversations because then I am able to talk about things that actually matter to you. But, sometimes there'll be these almost like shock jock kind of podcasts or radio shows where it's like they just want the meaty, juicy stuff. And I'm like, okay, but I can give that to you in other ways.
Right.
I'm like, I can be meaty and juicy in many
without
many
rehashing the whole thing.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for all the work that you do. And
thank you,
really am
Kari.
Honored to.
Oh, the honor is all mine. And I'm going to say it again because I'm right at the beginning of the book, but I'm loving it so much that people should read it. You'll never believe me. A life of lies, second tries, and things I should only tell my therapist. Kari, loved having you on the podcast.
You so much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I appreciate it.